All right, folks. Welcome to another XenTegra webinar Wednesdays. I got a great guest this week, and I'm actually pretty excited for this one. I got my friends from LoginVSI on the phone with me, and we're going to talk about Office 365, and I titled this Office Gone Wild, the Battle of the Cloud Workloads. And we'll talk about some of the uniqueness of this study. And before I do, I'll introduce myself. I'm your host. I'm Pete Downing, and I am the CMTO of XenTegra. And on the phone with me, I have Brian and Mark. So Brian, if you can give yourself a quick introduction.
Absolutely. I like the title you gave me too, Pete. Thanks for that. I'm actually the Director of Customer Services for LoginVSI. I oversee our support services and customer success divisions. And Mark is someone who I work closely with. Mark?
Hey, Mark, yeah, give yourself a quick introduction.
So I'm Mark Powell. I'm one of the engineers on staff here at LoginVSI. Today, I'm the performance ninja, but I've been working in EUC for probably 12 or 13 years now. So I'm going to be running through some of the presentation today and showing you guys around some of the testing we've done with Office 365.
Cool. And Brian, you've been with LoginVSI how long now?
For 4 years now, so 2016.
Yeah, you have a pretty good history. And Mark, you've been with them for how long?
A little over a year now.
Yeah, but you have a long history in the space, so it's great to work with you guys, and always a pleasure.
I would say you guys knew each other before he joined VSI, right, Pete?
Yep. Oh yeah. Yep. So cool. But thank you for joining, guys, and taking an hour out of your day. It's much appreciated. Although we're just sitting in our home offices anyway, so why not, right? All right. So a little housekeeping. We are on what's called GoToWebinar. For those who have returned, welcome back. For those who are new to the Webinar Wednesday series, keep on coming. We do this every week. Hey, we got this awesome Q&A dialogue. Please ask questions. We encourage it, and the harder the question, the better. And if we can't answer it, we'll find you an answer. So definitely ask questions. And in a minute, we're going to do some polls and get you guys involved on the phone. So get ready, because we'd like to have a little audience participation. That way we know you're all not sleeping on the other end. And just a quick FYI, there will be a recording sent out post this event. So if you want to share it with colleagues or other IT friends, feel free. But here's our agenda, very simple. I keep it pretty easy in the beginning. I hand off to LoginVSI to let them do their thing. And then we do a quick recap and final question. So pretty good flow. And if you've been here, we try to keep these as lively as possible. So again, as I said, we run these every week. Next week, we have Rubrik, and they're going to be talking about storage in the cloud. And it's not just about the data, it's also about the security. And they're going to talk about ransomware and what Rubrik is doing to protect your data from security events. So definitely bookmark this page and check out the weekly webinars that we're doing. And every now and again, I'll throw in what I like to call a Pete editorial, and I'll just do an independent webinar where I talk about a topic or a new update to a company or product. Also, definitely check out our events page, XenTegra.com/events. We run weekly events ranging from what I like to call mini workshops all the way up to one-day workshops to hands-on training. So definitely check those out. And then finally, we have our podcast page. So if you head over to XenTegra.com/podcast, Andy, our CEO and founder, does a great podcast called the Citrix Session. And he hones in on a blog every week, and they get the author of the blog on the phone, and they talk through the topic of the blog. So pretty cool podcast. And again, if you're on your iPhone or Android device, you can get them through all the different mediums. So like, for example, Spotify, iTunes, etc. And then finally, I am launching a new series, and I'm going to call it Nuts, Bolts, and Beers, Technology Unscripted. And the goal here is very simple. I'm going to take an hour and a half slot. I'm going to take up technology and run through the install, maybe have a guest from the company on the webinar, and run through a concept. So my first one is going to feature FS Logics, and I'm going to go through how to set up FS Logics inside of Azure with Azure files, and then also show you NetApp, Azure NetApp files. So that's going to be the first one. I'll be launching that registration page in the next day. So keep an eye out for that. And a drink is encouraged when you join the session, and it's going to be late day on purpose. So bring your drink of choice. All right, so I like to do polls as part of my weekly webinars, and I got a couple interesting polls today. And in the spirit of the topic, I want to ask one simple poll just to play into the topic today. Are you using Microsoft Office 365 today? And again, these polls are anonymous. No one else can see the data. And you know, again, if we ask you to answer from your perspective or ideally your company's perspective. So great way for us to take the data and twine it into the content. So I'll give these a couple seconds. I like to get at least 60% or higher participation. So again, don't be afraid to participate. And if you can't answer because you're an employee or a consultant, no big deal. And we'll give it a couple more. Going once, going twice, and last call. And we'll share the results. So we got a lot of folks, as expected, doing Exchange Online. And we got a small percentage of folks still doing what I'd like to call the hybrid or on-premise model. And we can talk all day of the why of that. I can probably guess why. However, if you want to reach out and talk through why you're still on Exchange hybrid, it'd be awesome to hear from you guys. We still have some other folks in the bottom part of the survey, either currently deploying or on the radar, and nobody on Google Enterprise this week. So interesting. Usually I get one. All right, the next question I want to ask is, are you I forgot to remove the Azure piece, but you are evaluating, ignore Azure, an infrastructure as a service cloud. So pick the cloud you're currently in or evaluating. So you're doing Azure, pick Azure, AWS, Google Cloud Platform, other. So if you're doing something outside the big three, pick that one. And if you're not in the cloud, then you pick the last option. And again, the goal here is to understand what clouds are you guys actually looking at. And we could probably take a wild guess which one's going to be number one. But arguably 3 years ago, this was probably the other way around. So we'll give this a couple more seconds. Going once, going twice. Last call for final responses. And done. All right, so as expected, yes, Azure is the leader. We got a lot of folks still looking at AWS. Listen, AWS is tried and true. One of the things I always say is if you're a software shop, you're probably running AWS. Great development platform, great development overall. And you know, so if this was a different audience, I would argue it could go the other way, right? And then for those still considering, yeah, I do see that, and I get it. And if you want to talk through the economics of cloud computing, today is going to highlight some of those, but definitely reach out and we can take you through that. All right, let's ask the other fun question. What is the biggest complaint when you're using a virtual desktop in a cloud environment? All right, so generalize this to whatever you define as cloud. So if you're running VDI and you're in your own data center, that's technically a private cloud. So definitely, what is your biggest complaint from end users when they're using either XenApp, XenDesktop, VMware Horizon, RDS apps? Doesn't matter what you're using. What's your biggest complaint? And we'll let this go for a couple seconds. And I'm curious to see what this one's going to come in. And it's a tie almost up. All right, last call for final responses. Going once, twice, and done. All right, so we got almost a tie between login time and response time. So you know, typically those are the two that are usually at the top. Disconnect issues. It's interesting being in the state we're in. I thought that would be a little higher. Access issues, you know, whether they can't get to it, etc. But you know, sometimes I see a couple of those. So good data here, and the top two, we're gonna talk to the second one definitely around. That's the theme of today, around the Office conversation. All right, and then the final question of the day is: are you looking at Windows Virtual Desktop, or WVD? So Microsoft WVD. Now, as you're filling this in, if you are currently piloting it, awesome. If you are looking to pilot it, let me know. We can maybe get you some free dollars to do it, and starting in July. So we'll definitely reach out. And if you're not sure, definitely reach out. We can give you the pros and cons. So as these answers roll in, last call for final answers. And going once, going twice, and last call. All right, so we got a good spread here. So we got a lot of folks in the pilot bucket. Awesome. I'm actually deploying 2 pilots right now as we speak. I got people that are in the currently bucket. We got some that think it won't meet their needs, and I'd love to have a conversation with you if you tick that. And then final bucket is not on the radar. So I'd be curious to see with the last 2 buckets, you know, are you Citrix? Are you VMware? Are you AWS? Are you something else? So definitely reach out if you'd like to have a conversation. I'm actually curious. So, all right. So some good data snippets there. Thank you for participating. It's always fun to get the data because we can use them as we go through the day today. All right, so let's talk about social. If you're not on social, I'm going to tell you right now, if you're not following Brian, you're missing out. He puts a lot of great content up on LinkedIn, as does Mark. So definitely give all of us a follow, but definitely give LoginVSI and XenTegra a follow on any of the platforms. We try to create awesome content and put things up that matter. And now let's jump into the fun and talk about, you know, Office 365 and the battle of the cloud workloads. And I'm going to toss the baton over to Mr. Mark Powell, and he's going to take us through some of the data that he has. And Mark, you'll explain the data, and maybe you can highlight that, you know, we have to say solution 1, solution 2, solution 3, because we were asked by the vendors not to expose their name, correct?
That is correct for various reasons, but if you would like to have a key for the actual paper that was written for this data, Pete can hook you up with that after the webinar.
Yeah, so what I'll do, so everybody that's attending, we're going to send the webinar, obviously the recording, and then we'll also send a PDF of the report. And if you download it, we'll get you this who is solution 1, solution 2, solution 3. So with that, Mark, I'll let you talk, and I'll keep an eye on Q&A for you.
Thanks, Pete. So this webinar was really created off of a engagement that we did with a customer. Customer came to us and said, we want to evaluate all the different EUC platforms between different public cloud, AWS and Azure, right? Which one's the fastest, which one performs the best with Office 365 workloads. So that's what we did. And if you're not familiar with LoginVSI, we are the industry standard around end user performance metrics and scalability and VDI workloads. So having said that, we created custom workloads with Office 365, and anything that a user would do through keyboard and mouse, we reproduce through software, and we're able to get results that we can then pass on data-driven to the customer. So we've won several awards throughout the years at various shows for our software. So what I want to show today is how the different platforms perform between AWS and Azure, and then some of the differences between on-prem environments and public cloud. So there's things that happen with the underlying infrastructure from a storage perspective, as well as a network routing configurations that I want to show as well. And we also want to show how to guarantee a good user experience. So why do we organize this webinar? Well, we put out a survey last year that asked organizations, what's the top struggles that you have in your organization? Windows 10 came up, right? Desktop as a service, Office 365. Obviously, all these things are intertwined together, right? And now this year, 2020, end user experience is on the top of the radar for most organizations. So we know these things are important. We know that customers are moving more and more to this type of model. So that's why we're here today talking about this. You can see Office 365 growth over the past few years. We now see a wide market share with Office 365, overtaking things like G Suite as the predominant platform in the market, with now over 200 daily million users on Office 365. And things like Teams growing, right, with the COVID stuff going on. So a lot of growth in Office 365. Now we see most of our customers actually have adopted it or are using it every day. And just some stats on the Windows client base. So last 5 years since Windows 10 has been released, Windows 7 went into life this year. We're we're now seeing a 74% market share with Windows 10. So you get a couple more years with Windows 7 if you're running it in Azure only, or if you pay for extended support beyond the traditional support model, which has a cost associated with it. But we're now seeing most customers using Windows 10 on a daily basis. So we're going to look at Office 365 transaction times between 3 of the major EUC vendors. Again, we can't say who. And we're going to look at similar size instances between Azure and AWS with each solution. So we built identical environments. They all run the same workloads between each environment. And then we're going to compare them between Azure and AWS. And the workloads do various functions inside of the Office suite of Office 365, and then copying files and things like that between SharePoint and OneDrive. And we standardize a sample set of 50 users between each of the testing environments. We use the E5 license with the security suite enabled.
Mark, just wanted to point out real quick that was important, the E5 security suite, because basically with the E5 security suite, all of the transactions with Office 365 are parsed through their filtering engines to check for any kind of malware, viruses, or whatnot. So we needed that specifically because the customer we were working with had that exact environment. So we try to replicate as best as we could.
Yep, thank you, Brian. So we can see from the overall testing, I'll jump into this in a minute, but solution 1 on AWS in this particular situation was the fastest, had the fastest response times in the interactions of the applications. Overall, the differences between the different platforms and the different configurations are pretty nominal. But if you're looking for the best bang for your buck, you know, we were able to tell this particular customer with hard data what that was going to look like, right? So a little bit of the setup of the configuration. Solution 1, we did an M5 instance in AWS versus Azure. We did a D2 V3. Solution 2, we did an M5 4x large versus a D16S V3, and then the same configuration for solution 3. So we tried to pick instances that were almost identical as far as CPU clock speed, core count, the RAM allocation, the disks associated with them. So things like in Azure, you can do premium SSD, standard SSD, that hard disk drives. I'll talk about a little bit of the differences between those in another slide here. So for the test setup, we did the standard duration of 48 minutes, which means that within 48 minutes, all 50 of the users would have logged on and will be executing the application workloads. And then we have a pause for a 2-minute log off at the end. As I mentioned, the transactions are scripted, interact with SharePoint and OneDrive, so they do things like copy files, receive files, upload, download, things like that. So we can see that the AWS solution 1 was actually the fastest. You'll see these are all the application transaction times as well as what the application transactions are doing, stacked on top of each other, right? So this is the total time to execute the entire workload. We break that down by application and every interaction. So every one of these interactions has timers wrapped around them, right? So we know exactly how long it would take a user to do that same function on that particular solution in that particular environment. And the spread is the difference between those differences of the application interaction. So the lower the spread, the better the user experience, right? The faster your applications are responding, the faster your mouse clicks are being input into the system, and so on and so forth. And then we look at, this is the hard data. You'll see solution 1 has lots of green on it. So those are the fastest transaction times. You'll see the averages as well. So I'll get into a little bit of that, but we run multiple segments that are randomized that actually are going to run these interactions several times, right? So we're then collecting the average of what that application interaction response time is going to be. So you'll see that overall, the differences are pretty nominal, but you look at solution 1 with an average, like say the Outlook start is 3.5 seconds versus solution 3, your average time is 10 seconds. So that's quite a bit of difference from a user's perspective, right? And then I'll move over into cloud provider 2, which is Azure. We weren't able to do solution 2 for this one due to licensing constraints. But again, solution 1 is nominally faster than solution 3 in this scenario. You'll show with a better user experience. Not much difference in these, but still able to calculate that data and show our customers that. And then we recorded the application start times as well. So you'll see, again, AWS with solution 1 beat out the other environments as far as performance. So again, for the customer, they're weighing in the price to performance value. They're able to get that data. They're able to understand their own application. So we recommend everybody run this on their own images, right? Test your own applications. Different cloud providers have different storage requirements and things like that. So say, for example, we found out that AWS was using Skylake generation chipsets versus Azure in the similar size instances we're using older Broadwell chips.
Right.
So there was a CPU performance gain on AWS that you would not get in Azure. So if you had a very CPU intensive application, you may consider going to AWS versus Azure for that particular application workload, or things like storage, premium SSD, standard SSD, that kind of thing. Oftentimes they're not actually SSDs. Oftentimes they're just IOPS that are guaranteed, that are allocated to that machine.
Yep.
Right. So if you have a highly intensive storage workload or an application that is very dependent on storage, you may want to consider using a premium storage tier, right? Or looking at a particular instance on AWS that has better storage performance.
So Mark, just looking at this slide,
yeah.
So it's part of your testing. Was this just out of the box profile, or was there any type of like FS logics underneath or anything like that, or was this just like bare bones, off, Windows 10 and just launching the app?
There's no FS logics in here. It's pretty vanilla Windows.
Okay.
No,
yeah, and then on Azure, were I'm assuming you were just using Azure files, and then to your point, there's obviously different tiers, and then there's Azure NetApp files, which is a very high performant option as well on top of Azure.
Yeah, so if you're using profile managers, if you're using MCS like in Citrix or something like that, if you're using some sort of user persona management or things like that, you obviously want to load all that up in your image. And then you have other things that come into play as far as performance, such as antivirus and security software and data loss prevention software and things like that all have an impact. And then your image optimizations, right? You run the VMware OSOT tool or Citrix optimizer. All that stuff can play into how your applications perform, right?
Yep.
But the nice thing about iterative testing process is you can peel back the layers one at a time, and you can directly attribute either the gain or loss in performance to whatever it is that you peeled off at that point.
Yeah, totally. Yep.
Exactly. Some things that we found out through doing this testing, the internet bound traffic for AWS, we ran both of these tests out of the US East region, but we found out that the internet traffic was actually routed through Seattle for AWS, and for Azure on the US East, it was routed through Virginia. So things like that as well, that like if you had a web app that was running in these images and it has to route through cross region to come back over to reach the actual web hosted application, that can have an impact on performance that you may not even be aware of, right, until you do some of this discovery
Well,
inside the
not
cloud?
only that, Mark, but also, you know, when you're talking about cloud providers, they are metering their data transversal, right? So that becomes an important aspect. You know, you make the wrong architectural design decisions, and now, you know, you're slowly bleeding, you know, finances basically as a result of that.
That's very true. Yeah, so I guess the gist of that is to do your due diligence about how these providers are doing their routing, how they're moving network traffic, what the data throttling and metering they're doing on the network is, and how's that going to impact your applications, your user experience, all that kind of stuff. So just because the resources line up the same between the different public cloud providers doesn't mean they're giving you the same performance, right? So it's important to look at on the underlying hardware, all the components involved when selecting a public cloud provider. And like I said, we recommend testing your workloads on your images. So a lot of customers and people out there, they guess how many instances and what type of instance they need. We can help you, and XenTegra can help you, you know, show you exactly how many you need, so you don't have to overspend. So you get the value, the total cost of ownership down, and have a good user experience. Just a little bit about us. We've been doing this for a while, evaluating end user experience. Most of the technology vendors in the space leverage our software when they push out their products, updates to their products. We've done many reference architectures with lots of these vendors. So we have white papers out there with deploying VDI on Nutanix, SimpliVity with HPE, for example. So we've done quite a bit of those. They're all on our website if you'd like to check those out. That being said, if there's any questions, we can put those out here. But I'm going to turn it over to our performance sensei for the day, Brian. He's going to actually show us technically how we would do some of this stuff.
Yeah. So again, the other thing I like to highlight too is you know, one of the lessons I learned early on when working with you guys is it's not just about end user and performance. It's also about change control as well. And that's a big piece of this story as well, is, hey, if you make a change to an image, what's the impact going to be? And that's key with you guys.
What's the unintended consequence, right? Because you can map out the intended consequence, but without a testing methodology, you still expose yourself pretty significantly.
Exactly. So I like to highlight that because I think people get lost in, hey, you just are measuring experience, but you're also preventing the what ifs, right? So if I install this app, how is it going to affect? You know, if I make this change, how is it going to affect? You know, if I add I don't know, do I need to add an express route versus a VPN, a traditional VPN? You know, things like that. You guys can help with some of those decisions. Do I need to change my series type from D to F series, or vice versa, right? So there's a lot of cool stuff you guys can do when it comes to cloud. Sorry, Brian, I'll let you jump in.
No, I mean, you know, I think everyone's done a great job of explaining, you know, the ways in which you can use it. Obviously, a picture is worth 1,000 words. So this is, you know, one example of our virtual user driving behaviors inside of a SaaS-based EMR application. And literally, you know, every behavior that our virtual user commits against the application, we're measuring. And then so, like, you know, that's the basis for the research that Mark had just provided. So I figured, you know, I'm not sure how long this thing is supposed to go for. How much time do we have here, Pete?
Time, don't worry. So yeah, just, you know,
all right, cool.
You want to talk through what these are doing?
Yeah. So we got two launcher devices. LoginVSI has two primary components. You have a management console for the collecting and analytics and reporting and orchestration. You have a launcher component as well. So the launcher component is approximation of the endpoint where the end user sits. And what LoginVSI does, the enterprise solution, it will instantiate connections from that point into the environment at the volume and rate that you specify to do things like load test optimize and right size, continually monitor your production environments for your ability to meet those service level agreements that you set with your stakeholders. But at the very core of it, what it really all amounts to is, we have these robotic users that have a variety of application interactions of which you can also customize to drive behaviors within your particular environment. Make sense?
Yeah, it does.
And then so what we then do is we take that data point and we'll give you, this is our management console. I probably have to re-authenticate here. This is our management console. This is the center where you'll manage your change, right? This is the center where you'll analyze your test results. And so you can see continuous testing results, that's past and previous testing results from a continuity standpoint, load testing results. So if you're comparing one configuration to another, I'll show you some examples of that. And then we can also generate application testing reports as well. So we found that large scale enterprises have, hundreds, if not thousands or tens of thousands of applications that they support. And it's becoming difficult with the rate of change for them to keep up with from a compatibility standpoint. So does the app work out after the change? And obviously changes that you make can have unintended consequences. So you need to test all of those apps, including those seasonal apps that you only sometimes interact with. And then also the workflow behaviors that the users do within those apps, we can also test those out from an SLA or performance adherence perspective. But those virtual users that I had showed you before running along down here at the bottom of your screen, they're reporting their data set into our dashboard from a continuous monitoring standpoint. So we can actually see what those end users sitting in those remote locations are experiencing while they drive interactions within their apps. And so, I believe someone said that one of the important, or the group said that one of the important things is how users experience the logon, right? So we can continually drive that logon from that launcher, from that endpoint into the environment and continually tell you what that looks like. And we'll give you the timestamps necessary in the event that you reach a variance or an exception. And we can even specify a threshold. So, in this particular environment, it looks like it takes around 6 seconds on average for it to log in. I don't want it to ever go above 40. And if it does, we will generate something like an application threshold or login threshold exceeded, and we'll give you a variety of the information necessary to determine why that's taking place, right? But also, we talked about latency. So latency also impacts your users' abilities to interact with their individual applications. So we'll track that. So not only the apps that your users are starting, but they're obviously, driving interactions within those apps, and we can tell you what their quote unquote normal experience is like. We can contextualize that within a profile so that when an exception state is reached, you'll get an alert. And we'll actually show you too if a user is unable to functionally complete their set of steps. So in this instance, this is a medical user that's supposed to be able to load up a DICOM, a nuclear radiation image of a heart, for example, and play that back. And unfortunately, during the change cycle, someone mistakenly knocked the license out of it. And so now they can no longer commit their application interactions that they're supposed to. You'll get that application failure ratio there. So we'll give you a lot of details and context around what your users are experiencing in those production environments. And then the next thing would be load testing as well. So, that's really what Mark was talking about. You set up 2 different environments with the same set of behaviors. In this instance, we're doing some behaviors inside of our standard Office applications. We have a test bed of 15 users. We're logging them in 10 minutes. We're connecting to a particular environment in this instance. And what I'm trying to demonstrate here is looking at 2 different versions of the Azure D4 instance type and how they compare to one another, right? And so that really amounts to what the application interactions end up being, and we can load all of those results on top of each other. So I can say here, you know, test number 4 is actually 1% faster overall from a login perspective, or Microsoft Word starts faster, or sending an email or deleting a calendar event, or, you know, looking at an MRI, or receiving a phone call because you're a call center employee, will literally give you the ability to wrap those results over, laid on top of one another, and give you the data to make data-driven decisions. And so that's, you know, more or less it from a load testing standpoint. Application compatibility and performance testing. What you're going to do is you're going to line up all of your applications that will make up the particular test that you wish to execute. So in this instance, I have added, again, the Office apps just for demonstration purposes, and you can see a list of all of the apps that I have that make up that particular report. And then what it will do is it'll start those apps up, drive those workload behaviors, and create a report that looks like this, that says, you know, one of those, you know, hundreds or tens of thousands of applications has failed. All of them have met their application performance SLAs. We'll give you statuses, we'll give you information about the configuration, and you'll literally be able to click on the particular application that's failing. My link is not working here. But in this instance, Outlook failed to launch successfully, and the reason is because normally we're enforcing a profile through policy and that popped out, right? So that's just giving you an example of it, right? Or, you know, ordinarily, you know, this is an application summary example for Allianz. They do insurance. So if I click on the website check, they were able to go through each of the individual portions of their website to drive those behaviors. But then when they went to do the price compare module of the workflow, it didn't work specifically, and they'll give you some details surrounding that. But, you know, more generically speaking, you know, the tool set is for helping to manage the volume of change, which is ever accelerating. Mark, you think there's anything else that I should really cover? We can ask.
So I got a question for you, Brian. So
Yes,
so on the screen here under configuration, you have a launcher and you got an application. So the launcher is, you know, the robot, I think, as you called it, and then the application.
Launcher is the endpoint. This is where your user sits. So I have an example of, you know, a Windows endpoint. This could be someone's desktop, their fat client they're sitting at. It could even be a Windows IoT device, doesn't matter. Or this is an example of Agile, just because we have, you know, built-in integration with them. But realistically, any Linux endpoint that your user would sit at, we can basically marshal and give the ability to automate launching those virtual users into the test bed.
Yeah, the one thing I would add to that is that the launcher introduces another component of the end user experience, which is latency from the endpoint, right? And so we can actually wrap SLAs and thresholds around latency thresholds. So if you, and the nice thing about doing the Agile and the thin client launcher setup is that you can pre-configure it as a launcher and ship it out in the field, and then you have this, you know, a non-technical user set up that machine or plug in like a USB thin client to an existing terminal, and then you're able to capture users' experience and metrics from that location from anywhere in the world, right? So then you can paint a picture around the globe of your various offices and how end user experience is from that location, and vice versa. I mean, we've seen customers where they run, you know, they have contractors that are in different countries and they don't control their local compute facilities, and so they mandate that they put a launcher at that facility so that they can report back how that how the network metrics are performing in that location. So just
so this is an example of that.
A launcher can be a static, like, virtual machine that you keep, you know, even if you keep it cold when you're not using it, but it's your test, it's basically becomes your tester. And is it recommended to have it just be static and powered off if you're not going to use it, especially in
Powered on,
Azure?
running all the time.
Okay, so you keep it running all the time and it simulates
yes.
Okay, and then as far as like let's say I'm a customer and I want to, I paid for a bunch of reserved instances, and is it not best practice to have the launcher running in the background in a normal day-to-day scenario? So like, for example, let's say I want to use those devices at the end of, overnight to do a test. Is that not a good practice? You see what I'm saying? So like I can take advantage of the compute that I'm already paying for.
Oh yeah,
so
you can definitely load test with them during the night too. I mean, you could literally you could time all of this stuff out. Yeah, and we've written automation.
Is the launcher agent, I guess you'd call it, is that invasive? It's not. It just
no, it's not. And actually, for the test that we were doing in the example, that data set that Mark had presented, this was actually a 20,000 user environment. So typically people build their launchers as a 2 vCPU, 4 gig of RAM machine, and that can facilitate approximately 25 concurrent virtual user sessions, because you're streaming protocol data back to this endpoint, right? So you end up having a large number of launchers. And realistically, like, for example, one of our customers, they have call centers all over the world, right? They have launchers all over the world. So not only do they have the ability to load test from those unique and specific geographies, but they're also getting continual data about what that experience is like. So this was one of the examples. So Mark said you can keep track of the latency experience. And so, on March 10th, like up until 4 o'clock or whatever in the morning, the latency was, approximately 30% higher than what it is. So like, if your user experience is used to latency levels around this, you might be having a bad time during that certain specific time. But that's outside of the norm, right? But you literally can generate an SLA report that says, our SLA, our latency measurements are within the confines of what we would deem normal. So let's really realistically set this to like 84 instead, and we've breached that 2% of the time over the course of May, right? And you can automate the generation of those reports for the stakeholders, right?
Yep. So yeah, if there's any questions, please please feel free to ask in the Q&A dialogue. I guess, Brian, one more question from my side, just because I'm curious, and I think I've asked this in the past, but if you bring up one of your launchers, that process that it's running, it's not a sequence. You guys call it again, what do you call it when you build that?
This is a virtual user session. So you'll notice it has an RDP session that the launcher ran the Microsoft terminal client and started up the session. The virtual user is actually in the user session of the hosting infrastructure that's providing this, user experience.
Yep. But the process that it goes through is it's like what do you guys call it? Not a script, but a
logon app. So most of the people that are listening to this are most likely used to monitoring solutions where you install an agent into your desktop image, right? You crack your VDA, and now instead of running 43 agents, you're running 44 agents. And then there's obviously a concern about like, well, what is the overhead of running the monitoring solution? What's going to monitor the monitoring solution? And so as opposed to doing that, when our launcher triggers the logon event, we just have a logon app, and you can do that through things like UEM that triggers and starts our virtual user up. So it instantiates itself within the user session, and then when it's done, it just cleans up and goes away, right? You don't leave that overhead there.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
One thing I would mention as well, Pete, just to answer your question about the does it run overnight, can it be toggled? So the actual schedule of when the user can run can be continuous. It can be scheduled throughout times of a day or throughout the week. So you can schedule it during production hours or non-production hours, and as well the login, the load testing capabilities that can all be scheduled as well. So you have a degree of flexibility of how and when you want to run these tests.
Yeah, and then the actions, the different apps and actions. Is there a place where you guys share some of the more common ones, or are
Yeah, check
customers
this out.
having to build those on their own?
Look, people are being inundated with requests to put hundreds of people on top of Zooms. Like, how do you possibly prepare for that load to be put on your systems? Well, now, you can just go to our template marketplace and download a Zoom workload, and look at all the activities that it does, including, by the way, chatting with people, right? Starting up a Zoom session, inviting people to the Zoom session, turning on its webcam, so you're going to want some GPUs to support that, right? And you can literally see the quality of the GPUs supporting this particular video. Not great. But in any event, you just literally just plug that in. You want to go and you want to add SAP stuff? Sure. Look, check this out. We have a workload that goes and manipulates SAP. So this is a SaaS-based app, right? You have no control of the experience. Like, you're getting what SAP gives you. But now you can position your launchers in your Philippines offices, in your South America offices, driving your user behaviors, and you can literally see when it's costing you money. In large-scale enterprises, even a couple seconds of a difference in processing transactions can end up costing millions of dollars. So then you take that data set and you make intelligent design decisions about it.
Nice. Yeah, and this is what I was trying to get you to, is that you have this awesome marketplace now, and you give some baseline examples, and then and then I equate the building of these or editing these as like the good old days of packaging, right? And if you it's not in JSON, it's in was it not XML, right? What's it in?
Well, our base language is based off of C#, so I'm assuming that most people that are listening to this are familiar with PowerShell, so they should feel right at home. I'll give you an example of it, right? You can declare some variables. This is starting the executable. We're typing to the window, or we're typing to a specific control, right? We're wrapping timers around things. But it would be foolish of us to expect everyone becomes a programmer of our specific scripting language. So we've included something called application X-ray, right? So now if I want to interact with this button here, say for example, it's going to give me all the control elements. I can specify the particular action that I want to take, and please work, because this is a live demo, right? And we're going to hope that it works, but realistically, check it out, and now I know that it's actually working, right? And then I can just copy that code snippet curl directly into my workload, and now I have that functionality as part of the workflow. Pretty easy, right?
Yeah, it's pretty sweet. So cool. Well, all right. Again, if there's any questions, please ask. And if someone wanted to try this out, obviously they can work with us. But is there any way to get to this quickly, Brian and Mark?
Yeah. So we provide a 5-day grace period, but I would really encourage whoever's listening to reach out directly to XenTegra. The reason why we partner with companies like XenTegra is that they are the experts in EUC, right? Let them demonstrate how you're realistically going to use this, how you're going to get the best value. Most of them you're probably already working with, your local reps. Contact them and they'll get you in touch with us if necessary. But I know that XenTegra actually has a few LoginVSI certified engineers on their staff. So
cool. So again, last call for questions while we wrap up. But to Brian's point, yes, we're officially a partner of LoginVSI, and a few of our guys have officially become certified in the stack. So I'm excited about that. But we can also not only help you get it up and running, we can help you build these various app workflows and be able to help you get the test cases that make sense for your environment. So again, XenTegra, if you're not familiar with us, this is Andy, our founder and CEO, and really we focus on two things. One, we like to do things like these webinars to help enable our customers, but parallel to that, we work very hard to be not only a partner as far as transactional goes, but also a good partner to a company like LoginVSI. And so we can definitely sell you and work with LoginVSI to get the product into your hands, but parallel to that, we can also come in and help you get the most out of it. So we have technical consultants that can come in help you get it up and running, help you understand how it works, and make sure you get the most out of your investment. But the value here is simple. When you work with a partner, not only do we know LoginVSI, but we'll know Citrix, we'll know Azure, we'll know AWS. So we become that single vendor and that single trusted advisor. So if you're not working with a partner, definitely give us a consideration. If you're already working with us, thank you. And we look forward to potentially showing you guys more of LoginVSI. Now, we spent a lot of time talking about cloud, and just as a quick call out to my MSP team, we are a Citrix service provider partner, and we're also a Microsoft Gold and Microsoft Solutions provider partner. So we are very heavily embedded in the MSP space. And then our own data center in Atlanta is also a combination of Pure Storage, VMware, and Citrix as well. So we are end user compute experts as well as cloud experts. So again, last call for final questions, but as I close out, I'm going to encourage you to definitely reach out if you want to dig deeper and see this firsthand. If you're interested in digging deeper, we can not only show it to you, but we can quote it and we can work with you to get it up and running. So a couple things to think about as you exit the webinar today. All right, and then finally, last call for questions, but any final thoughts, Brian, on your side?
No, I mean, if you're looking to understand what your user density per VM is, or what the best instance type for your workload is, or you have some nagging issues with intermittent delays in connections or applications, or invasive issues, or you need a report on anything like that, reach out to Pete and his team. You'll be in great hands with them.
Cool. And any final thoughts from you, Mark?
No, I just thank you for having us, Pete. I hope this was helpful for everybody. And just again, evaluate all the options when you're looking at public cloud, and make sure you're getting the proper performance out of it. And if we can help you with it with XenTegra, then we'll be happy to do that. Nice.
And so again, thank you, gentlemen, for joining us today, and look forward to doing another one in the future. And if you're interested in digging deeper, definitely reach out to XenTegra. We can help you get LoginVSI running in any scenario. So I encourage you to do so. Again, you will get a recording of this webinar, so if you want to watch again or share with some friends, feel free. And then finally, if you download the PDF when we send it, we'll give you the key to the various solutions, so you can tie who the solution is in the white paper to the actual vendor. So with that, I'm going to say thank you all for joining us this Wednesday. Hopefully we'll see you next Wednesday. And again, next Wednesday we got Rubrik coming on the call. And by the way, for anybody who joins next week, Rubrik is giving everybody a gift card to Grubhub. So just as a friendly little gimmick to help get that going. So with that, I'm going to say thank you. Have a great day, and thank you to LoginVSI for joining, and hope to see everybody in the future webinar Wednesday.
Thanks, Pete.
Awesome. Thanks, Pete.